there's David Steinberg, relative newcomer to the high-level Magic scene. Welcome, David, to an awesome top 8 here. But I got bad news for you, David. You're facing down the nasty one, Matt Nass. Matt is going to bring the heat, no doubt about it. He decided to sleeve up a really cool deck for this tournament, Mono Black Gift. In the hands of David Steinberg, probably got to say the best performing deck in the tournament, Jund Sacrifice. What do you make of the game 1 matchup here, Sed?
A pretty close one, I think. Nass is looking at a matchup where, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit over the past couple of days, where Mayhem Devil is the scariest card. Now, one thing I will say that Steinberg does have access to that a lot of these other Jund Sacrifice decks do not have access to, a lot of copies of Corvold. And I mean a lot, with 3 main deck copies. Some players are playing like 1 or 2 in the sideboard, whatever. But also, worth noting here about Steinberg's version of this deck is he's got a lot more manipulation over his draws because he has access to a lot of copies of Trail of Crumbs. So if he's looking for something in particular, I would say he's going to be able to find it pretty easily, where some other Jund Sacrifice players are not. So I expect a pretty close game. And honestly, Marshall, I expect a pretty close match.
Now, when it comes to Matt Nass's choice here, Mono Black God Pharaoh's Gift, tell us about how the deck works in general. You know, we have to remember that Historic, at least at this level of play, this is its debut tournament, right, at the highest levels of Magic play. And there's people that may not be familiar with what the deck's actually trying to do. I mean, look at his hand looks weird right now when you look at it, like Massacre Worm. What is going on there?
I mean, it does look weird, and that's because it is weird. I mean, this is a strange-looking hand for this deck, and it's a strange deck in general. We call it Mono Black Gift, short for God Pharaoh's Gift, and that's a very powerful artifact that you can cheat onto the battlefield in some respects. But the one thing here about Nass's deck is that it just hasn't really shown up much. So when I look at this Mono Black deck that we've seen here from Matt, and he's in the top 8, the times when I've watched him, I haven't really seen God Pharaoh's Gift play a role, and that's actually kind of a benefit insofar as he can play a normal game with Cryptbreaker, with Priest of Forgotten Gods, with Fiend Artisan, with Ravenous Chupacabra, and just kind of outgrind his opponents that way, and that's what we might see him try to do here in this first game.
Yeah, you know, this to me represents a kind of 2 different sides of what Matt Nass is all about. Matt Nass is very well known for loving combo decks.
Of course.
He's won a lot of tournaments with them. He is not shy about it. In fact, when we asked him, what's your play style? He said, combo, combo, combo.
Yep.
And that was exactly what he wanted to do. If you want to kind of contrast that with the way that David has approached the matchup, David said, I love finding angles to attack established meta games, which has been difficult for this event, and playing heavily synergistic decks. I also love limited. Oh, hello, David. And eagerly wait the next Premier Limited event. I'm right there with you, David. But as you can see, 2 very different approaches to, well, any metagame that they're trying to attack. Matt is really trying to do the most broken thing that he can at any given time. But the cool twist here is exactly what you highlighted, Cedric. Look at the backup plan here for Matt Nass. He's just putting out 3-3-3-3-1-2 with the Priest going. And we haven't seen anything that referenced a God Pharaoh's Gift in this match at all yet.
No, not at all. You know, we haven't seen Gate to the Afterlife. We haven't seen God Pharaoh's Gift. What we're just seeing are value creatures, Priest activations, maybe soon Fiend Artisan activations. So nothing too crazy going on. Now for David, he needs to find a red mana. And Fabled Passage is a way to do that. It's a little bit of a slower way to do it, but it is a way to turn these 3 copies of Claim the Firstborn on. But Nass, I have to imagine, is trying to get this game over with pretty quickly, which is why we saw that Priest activation last turn. Fiend Artisans, plural, are now on the battlefield, and I think he might be able to sense that, look, it looks like David might be stumbling and fumbling around a little bit, so let's see if I can try to kill my opponent here pretty quickly. Interesting situation here for Nass, where does he want to activate Fiend Artisan? Does he want to activate Priest again like we saw on the last turn? I think that is unlikely. The biggest problem here for Matt is that as big as these Fiend Artisans may become, they don't have trample. And with that in mind, you're going to get to see some chump blocking and, of course, the activations of Witch's Oven and Sacrificing Foods and ups and down and all arounds that we've seen with Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven for a long time. So while I do believe that Nass would like to get pretty aggressive here in this game and in this matchup in general, that's going to be pretty tough to do.
Apologies for the audio there. I hope that we're back at this point. I realized that my microphone had cut out there, and I think yours might have as well. Said.
Oh,
so all of that beautiful commentary that we just gifted to the audience, it has been thrown in the trash bin. I was just saying that it's interesting when you build these decks around Godpharaoh's Gift, particularly with Gate to the Afterlife, that you have to put so many creatures in your deck, right? And that kind of is a big deck building restriction, where it can lead you to make some interesting choices with cards like Ravenous Chupacabra and Massacre Worm that act as spells kind of when you cast them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you need, the key, the thing that kind of breaks it, right, is Gate to the Afterlife. And we haven't seen that just yet. But the only non-creature spells that Matt actually has in his list are 4 Gate to the Afterlife and 2 Godpharaoh's Gift. Everything else is either a land or a creature, and that's because you need a certain creature density. You need to get up to 6 of them in your graveyard before you can activate the Gate to the Afterlife.
Which, for Matt's deck, might be a little bit more difficult than it appears. There are definitely going to be some games where it's easy, others not so much. But again, this is what makes this deck pretty powerful, Marshall, is that he is able to play a normal game. We are just watching a normal game of Magic right now, and if you didn't know the deck list at home, or you and I didn't know in the booth here, we'd say, oh, this looks like a mono-black aggro deck. What are you talking about, Gate to the Afterlife and Godpharaoh's Gift? He's just given some mono-black beatdowns with Phyrexian Towers and Castle things, and more often than not, that has been good enough here for him this weekend, which is what makes this deck so powerful, but also it's nice to know that, hey, I can also win games the other way if it comes down to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to have, to me, this archetype that you're just describing here have been some of the most powerful types of decks that we've seen, particularly in middle to older formats like Modern, Pioneer, or here, where you have a game plan, but you also have an oops, I won, right? Where you're just like, oh, sorry, Godpharaoh's Gift here, 3 turns early and you're just dead, right? Where, a lot of the time they can just grind them out like exactly how you described. And that does seem to be what's happening here, at least thus far.
Yeah, we got to see the first Claim the Firstborn finally be cast here by David. He targeted Priest of Forgotten Gods over anything else in the battlefield. And yes, it's an obvious play that if you're Nash, you can sacrifice that to a Woe Strider. So that's exactly what Matt did do. Now, again, these Claim the Firstborns, as we've seen in Jund Sacrifice Mirrors all weekend long, are going to be used more as removal spells. Either Nass is going to sacrifice the creature that's targeted, or David's going to take it and sacrifice it to a Witch's Oven. So just look at those as just a 1 red mana removal spell for whatever creature David really wants to target, assuming that it costs 3 or less mana. Over the course of the next couple of turns, as David's going to still continue to try to get that value engine online with Trail of Crumbs.
All right, well, there's one of the cards, by the way, that has really shown itself to be one of the more broken cards in the format, perhaps Phyrexian Tower being used by, Mono Red Goblins uses it.
Oh, everybody's using it. Everybody's trying to.
That's kind of a red flag. It's like, hey, wait a second now.
Well, one thing that players did do a beautiful job of identifying here for this tournament is that Phyrexian Tower is busted. And now just trying to figure out the best way to use it. Nass likes his deck a lot because he's a mono-black deck that is happy to play 4 of that legendary land. And I know that 4 might sound like a lot of a legendary land, but that's just how powerful that is. And that was a real draw to his deck here this weekend.
It'll be interesting to see what happens to the suspended list in the wake of the tournament. It's always fun to speculate on cards that performed really well. Are they too good? Do they warp the format? That kind of stuff. I think that's what Twitter was invented for, right? To speculate on these things. Yeah,
something like that.
But I did say suspended, which is kind of interesting because that historic is unique in that it actually has a suspended list in addition to a banned list. Suspended is where Wizards of the Coast can put cards that are sus, as we say in the business these days. They're suspect. There's like, this might be too good, and they can ban it for kind of a tournament cycle and see how the format reacts and how things go, and then they can make a decision to go ahead and take it off the suspended list and either put it into banned or put it back into circulation.
Yeah, a lot of
interesting
options.
Take.
It is an interesting thing and options that are available to Wizards of the Coast. And I know that one card that has definitely overperformed this weekend is the one that David is hovering over and resolving now in Mayhem Devil. He has been a little bit behind this game. Yes, his life total is much higher than Matt. Well, yeah, it's much higher than Matt's. It's 18 to 14. Matt has the better battlefield, but I'm not for sure how much longer, because David should be able to get some work done this turn with Mayhem Devil, with sacrificing a Fabled Passage, with those Witches' Ovens, plural, and don't forget about that Claim the Firstborn in hand as well.
Well, this is the big turning point here, because as you mentioned, Matt Nass had been building up quite nicely, but now all of a sudden David Steinberg has that key card Mayhem Devil, and we'll see if he can turn this thing around. Not in a terrible position. Remember, David's at 18 life with a whole lot going on the battlefield with the Trail and the Cauldron familiar and all that kind of stuff. It's not like David's, you know, losing the game, but with a Mayhem Devil, it feels like he has the power now to just take over.
Yeah, I'm curious where he wants to start with this Mayhem Devil, because do remember that Nass's deck does play a decent amount of removal in it, and you see the copy of Ravenous Chupacabra in hand, so it looks like we're going to start by sacrificing a Fabled Passage right now, put your Mayhem Devil trigger on the stack, take care of that goat, and see how we want to move forward here. Going to get a base out of the deck. It is worth noting that he did not have a mountain to search up with the Fabled Passage, otherwise we would have seen probably him sacrifice the Fabled Passage, get a mountain, play the claim, but he actually had to use his one basic mountain that was already on the battlefield to cast the Mayhem Devil. So not getting, I would say, as much out of this Devil as he probably would have liked to, but Marshall probably able to get enough.
Right, and you know, this is where these cards come in that we were talking about earlier, like that Ravenous Chupacabra. Look, that is a fine Magic card, not quite up to par for historic on its own, right? You'd prefer to have more powerful option at 4 mana, but given the fact that Matt wanted to build this deck around Gate to the Afterlife, that
Yeah, it still looks pretty good. I mean, we're seeing Mayhem Devil get some work done. Again, it's going to die, but in the meantime, you're seeing him really kind of manage the battlefield. Now, the next step, if you're Steinberg, is I got to take care of these Fiend Artisans. Now, again, Fiend Artisan is large as it is, 6/6s. They can be blocked by Cauldron Familiars all day long, and that's all that matters right in here for Steinberg. So if I were to talk to Steinberg right now, jump into his Discord channel and say, hey, man, how do you think this is going? And I think he'd probably think, it's going pretty good.
apparently the Ravenous Chupacabra my microphone right in the middle.
It's going to shoot right through your cords, bro.
Apologies for the for that. It seems to be an issue for me today. We'll try to get it worked on. In the meantime, I might get interrupted from time to time. Again, we do apologize for that.
Oh, chat's saying that I'm immune to mute and internet problems.
Apparently, you have protection from the Chupacabra, it seems.
Oh yeah, we'll see about that. Yeah, we'll see about that. Trust me.
Oh man. But in the meantime, boy, these Fiend Artisans are really doing work, huh?
I mean, they're big, but are they actually doing anything particularly effective? My answer to that would be no, because Cauldron Familiar is blocking it. One of these is going to get taken. I'm curious if it's going to get taken and activated. We'll see here in just a moment. But for Steinberg, everything's looking up. Again, it was kind of like a slow, clunky start. Nass wasn't able to take full advantage because of the Witches' Oven Cauldron Familiar strategy. And just the ability to chump block creatures that don't have trample for days and days and days. And so if I'm Steinberg, I am feeling really freaking good. And he was actually able to take both Fiend Artisans. He can sacrifice them both to Witches' Ovens, activate them too. I mean, this is an insane turn for David. You see Nass with a little smile. I think he knows that he's in some serious trouble.
Yeah, for sure. You know, what it stands out to me here is how we were describing that this deck has a perfectly fine, fair backup plan type strategy, but we really have seen nothing, right, to do with God Pharaoh's Gift, which is kind of the over-the-top broken thing that Matt Nass can do with this deck, and he needs it here. Once you let Steinberg set up this level of interaction of synergy with the double Witches of and the Trail of Crumbs and the Mayhem Devil, he is going to be able to manage these boards effectively for the duration of the rest of the game. And that means that Matt really needs to go over the top here. He needs to find some of his really busted stuff. And right now, he doesn't have it.
Yeah, he doesn't. And even a card like Master Worm right now, which Nass could cast, and it would come in and do its thing. Its thing is not nearly good enough because Mayhem Devil is going to survive, and then Cat +7 plus Trail is just going to get to work in a very meaningful way. I mean, this build of Jund Sacrifice is different than what we're going to see from LSV and Gab Nassif. insofar as you're seeing the Trail of Crumbs engine online. We may see Corvold over the course of this match, and that's a big difference, because one card, Marshall, that you're not going to see here from Steinberg, and I want to make sure I don't muff this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, is no collected companies. So that's also very, very notable. The advantage engine here is Trail of Crumbs, and you're seeing it be played beautifully in this game.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Huh. I'd like a collected company, I think.
Well, so the thought process behind Steinberg's build, because I know one of the people that he got ready with, David Inglis, Tangrams, who won the SCG Tour Online Championship Qualifier on Monday of this week, was their plan was, we don't want to get Graph Digger's Caged in any way, because we think that card is going to be popular. And if you take a look at the build of Steinberg's list, Graph Digger's Cage is a full blank. It's very, very, very bad. So he's able to play kind of these value, like, you want to play a Jund Sacrifice mirror with me? Okay, cool. I've got Trail. I've got the ultimate card in Corvold. I think I do a pretty nice job of managing Mayhem Devils. And those are the cards that matter. And yeah, Company can be really good, but we also know that Company can be a swing and a miss sometimes too. And you know, that's the rationale behind this, because the games do have a tendency to go a little long. And if the games are going to go long, Trail of Crumbs is an ace, where Collected Company just isn't nearly as good.
That's really interesting. And, you know, I'll tell you, as we see the game really wind down here, that this is Steinberg finishing things off. As you see, Matt Nass is down to 4, and with all the synergies going, it's an easy win. And that is game number 1 going to David Steinberg. This is really impressive to me, Cedric. So this is what David said in an interview piece that we had with him. What historic cards are you excited to play with? David said, I don't know if I'll end up registering it, but I love Collected Company. Yeah. So to me, that really shows a good logical approach, because if it's one of your favorite cards and you have every excuse to play it, right? I mean, as we mentioned before, our next match is going to be Gabriel Nassif versus Luis Scott Vargas. There's 8 copies of Collected Company between those 2 players. So it would be hard pressed to say that it's a mistake to play it in the tournament. Still, David was able to say there's logic and reasoning beyond, you know, power level plus my favorite card that is compelling enough to me to go for it. And that to me is really impressive, because I don't know about you, but for my favorite cards, I don't need much of an excuse. And if I have a good excuse, I'm playing them. Like,
yes, that is generally
in
how
my
I
deck.
roll. That is generally how I roll as well. So some discipline to be sure there, and obviously the decision making to not play his favorite card is working out beautifully for him with his first real high profile finish here in Magic the Gathering. So kudos to him, and currently up a game against one of the very best in the world here in Matt Nass.
That's right. Really impressive run here for David Steinberg, and he's trying to keep that run going. I'll remind you, here in the top 8, we're not going to be losing anybody today. Nobody will be knocked out. The elimination matches are going to be tomorrow when we come back for more top 8 coverage. So either way, whoever you're rooting for here, they will still be alive. But boy, oh boy, impressive stuff from David Steinberg, not only making the top 8 of this event. And remember, this isn't a normal open field event. This is an invitational that had an absolutely stacked field, and he finds himself in an absolutely stacked top 8, and now 1 game away from moving on even further into the tournament. Really impressive kind of debut here for Steinberg.
And Steinberg taking what I'm going to call are some disciplined mulligans. That first hand, I think, was a pretty clear-cut mulligan. He thought it through and then decided to send it back. That second one with Mayhem Devil, Claim the Firstborn, and a couple of lands, he decided to send that one back too, and I think you can make an argument for keeping it, but I would be I would be in favor of mulliganing it. This hand is a lot more functional. Yeah, the Cauldron Familiar doesn't look great, but Ooze does in this matchup, and it definitely has a lot of relevant text. Then Murderous Rider can contain something like a Rankle, something like a Priest of Forgotten Gods, assuming you're able to find your 3rd land. So, and he has found his 3rd land there in the Fabled Passage. So, look, a mulligan of 5 is never great. Marshall, you and I both know that. We've been doing this long enough to be sure of that. But this actually gives, I think, Steinberg an opportunity to play this second game.
Let's see how this thing goes. I just would love to see any hint that Matt Nass has God Pharaoh's Gift in his deck at any point.
No proof.
Instead, it's just Lazarus
proof.
Reaver. Make my army slightly bigger. Get in there.
We have 0 proof. We've watched Nass's matches a couple of times. Maybe I missed it when I watched it. Maybe one of the matches that he was on where you and I weren't doing coverage of the match, but like I just haven't seen it ever. And every time I've played against this deck, I've never seen them do anything resembling GPG. Like just no gate, no nothing. It's just like value black creature beatdown. And you know what? It's got Matt into the top 8, so who am I to argue?
You see Soul Guide Lantern there for David Steinberg, pulling that out of the sideboard, understanding the importance of the graveyard for Matt Nass if he's going to be doing the broken things.
Yep. And again, a real appeal of this deck, and we're going to see it here, is just, hey, I'm playing a normal game of Magic, so Rankle, just a card with a lot of text that does a lot of different things. I know Paulo Vitor Damarosa once described this card as like a 4-mana flying attacking planeswalker in some respects because it has 3 different decisions and a lot of decisions with it. So in some respects, it does feel like a planeswalker at times. And, you know, this game it's going to be given a beatdown like a planeswalker would because, you know, this turn is a really, really nice one here for Nass. And the follow-up turns of Ravenous Chupacabra and probably Massacre Worm, those are going to look pretty good too.
Yeah, I like that comparison with Rankle and the Planeswalker. Also in that Rankle's powerful enough that it's a must kill, right?
Yep.
And most good Planeswalkers are like, if I just leave that on the board for too long, I will lose the game. And that describes Rankle as well.
And, it's hard to remember, too, that Nass knows that there's a Murderous Rider in hand. And more importantly, the Swift End portion of that card can take care of a Rankle. But you know what? You got your shot in, you got your trigger, you're able to do a little something with that card. So that exchange is one that you're happy with. And also, in order for Nass to Swift End that card, because, again, we didn't know the Abrade was coming, Nass would have to take 2. So it looks good.
And here we go, the must kill
would have
gets
to take
killed.
2.
Right, and that is the case, though. Down to 8 goes David Steinberg, and but thankfully for him, Rankle Master of Pranks off the battlefield now. Still, the beatdowns are very real. And look at this Massacre Worm for Matt Nass. He's going to come down. No sack outlet there either. So it's actually going to cost 2 life, and that probably is going to do it. Trail of Crumbs off the top of the library doesn't look like it's nearly good enough here for Steinberg. And Matt Nass with the aggressive draw, a little bit of disruption and a lot of beatdowns. Looks like he's going to be able to get the job done here, I think.
Yeah, 6/5 on the battlefield too. So Claim, Abrade, those aren't going to be nearly good enough. Nass has got some good spells in the holster here, and Thoughtseize, a Ravenous Chupacabra. Wasn't a free win with Steinberg on a mulligan to 5, but Nass's draw did shape up pretty nicely here. So we like it here for Matt, and I think we're headed to a 3rd game here in just a bit.
Does feel like it. Now, there are plays for Steinberg. Can play Trail of Crumbs, which can get back the Cauldron Familiar to provide a chump block, and the Murderous Rider, at least from Steinberg's perspective, does hold back the other 2 creatures.
It does.
Unfortunately, for him, there is a Ravenous Chupacabra in hand here for Nass, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Chupacabra is going to take a break from eating your cords.
No, we'll see.
And eating a Murderous Rider instead. So there we go.
All right. And that was plenty enough to hopefully not kill my mic, but definitely clear the Murderous Rider. And that means that we're going to get a game 3 here in our 3rd quarterfinal. Ooh, this is a 2-day top 8 weekend where we want to thank you for coming along here and watching with us right now. We're watching Matt Nass versus David Steinberg.
That's Matt at work. You know, one thing, too, about this top 8, and Marshall, I know that you've talked about it, and I'm sure our friendly friends over the news desk have talked about it plenty. I mean, this is one of the best top 8s in Magic history. And it's funny, right? Because if you're David Steinberg, you can look at this and go, well, I mean, all these players are so much better than me. I'm like, kind of the oddball out there, but absolutely not. I mean, we watched him play a very, very good first game, a little unfortunate on the mulligan there in game number 2, but he's in this top 8 for a reason. So when we look back on this top 8 in history and say, hey, this was a great top 8 and David Steinberg, I've got a feeling we're going to say this is a great top 8 and where David Steinberg broke out in Magic.
I have that same vibe, and you and I have been both been doing the same job for a long time and seen a lot of people come and go through the top ranks of Magic players, and I just have a good vibe about David. I would not be surprised at all if we look back at it that exact way that you described. All right, here's Thoughtseize to kick off game number 3. Matt Nass says, what are you working with here, David? And as you can see, it's Liliana's Defeat, Cauldron Familiar, Goose Ooze, and a Dragon Skull Summit. Of note here, do not see any green mana for Steinberg at the moment. Just a Swamp and a Summit. So that could factor into what Nass ultimately decides to take away here. You know, looking at the most powerful option, generally speaking, you'd think it would probably be the Ooze, I suppose. But for development purposes, the Goose and even the Familiar matter. Ultimately, though, it looks like Matt Nass wants to try to get a Fiend Artisan going, and he's going to take away removal.
Ooze, Goose, need green mana. Obviously, it's nice to have this cat engine online, this cat oven engine online, right? Because we saw how effective this was against Fiend Artisan in the first game with regards to blocking, and now, okay. So that's what we call in the business a good draw.
Wow. Hello, Mayhem Devil.
Yeah.
And Matt Nass says, are you kidding me? I just Thoughtseized you. I played my Fiend Artisan, and now it's going to be gone before he even gets to untap.
Well, this is classic Thoughtseize. You and I have talked about how long we've been doing this. Look, you can't stop the top of the opponent's deck. You can Thoughtseize as much as you want. Yeah, you can Thoughtseize as much as you want. You can't stop what they draw, and they're going to draw perfects.
What I've definitely never seen is somebody take away a card with Thoughtseize and then just draw that exact card the next turn. That's not happened. Yeah, that's the one thing that is not allowed.
Now, good news here for Nass, I will say. Well, it's about to become bad news because now green mana has been found. Good news here for Nass is that he does have a Chupacabra to take care of the Mayhem Devil. He's going to have to take his licks in the interim, though.
You can see Matt kind of sitting back in his chair a little like, come on, really? This could not have gone worse. Honestly, the start looked pretty reasonable there for Nass. When he said go, he had stripped away relevant cards, and Steinberg was not on green mana, and he had Fiend Artisan, and all of a sudden, the last 2 turns have been a pure disaster. Green mana found and a top deck Mayhem Devil to take care of that Fiend Artisan has left Matt Nass with nothing on board the last 2 turns, and David Steinberg is rolling to victory here at this point.
Yeah, this game took a turn. Now, Chupacabra is going to take care of the Mayhem Devil, and Nass is going to take care of that Chupacabra in the interim. Excuse me, Steinberg's going to take care of that Chupacabra in the interim. So still some attacks to be done, and the thing that makes this Jund Sacrifice deck so difficult, Marshall, is that when it has Cat plus Oven going, what it gives itself is it gives itself just that little bit of reach to cross the finish line. It's slow and steady, but slow and steady in this instance might be good enough to win this race.
That is right, and we've seen that so many times that, yeah, okay, Matt dealt with the devil, that's pretty good, and is going to start doing some things, but there's a very real clock now on Matt Nass thanks to the cat oven plus that Gilded Goose creating a bunch of food every turn, and that might be all David Steinberg does for the rest of the game, and it might be all he needs to do for the rest of the game, because Matt Nass is in terrible shape here in this opening quarter for him.
Yeah, Matt's got to be able to break out of this cat oven kind of lock that's in place right now. Crypt Breaker doesn't really solve the problem in a meaningful way. Priest of Forgotten God's not really so much either. And David's feeling good enough about this that he's going to mosey on in with this Scavenging Ooze that can turn itself into a 4/4 at a moment's notice with the Goose plus the Forest there. So lot to like if you're rooting for David Steinberg. Yeah, and I even like this too, which is just, well, we'll see if it's going to be the Swift End portion of this, or if it's just going to be straight up Murderous Rider. I can see an argument for both, but I think just having maybe another creature on the battlefield does make some sense. Not sure exactly what Steinberg wants to clean up here with the Swift End portion. Looks like he's going to go with the Priest. It's all kind of gravy at this point either way, though.
Yeah, this is really falling apart here for Nass. Again, everything just took such a sharp downward swing for him after that Mayhem Devil showed up. That was really a critical top deck for Steinberg. Then finding the green mana to unlock the rest of the hand has just been super rough for Nass, who had a decent opener, but Steinberg going through the motions here on the last part of the game. As you can see, nothing left for Matt Nass outside of just a Crypt Breaker on the battlefield, and Cauldron Familiar dropping his life total even further. He's down to 4.
Yeah, now you're seeing some of the value there from Phyrexian Tower, able to sacrifice the Cauldron Familiar. And Nass is just going to draw a useless swamp. I mean, he can obviously turn that into a 2/2. He could play that, activate Castle Lockvein, lose a little bit of life. It's not looking good for Matthew Nass, though.
Let's see what he finds here. He's going to activate the castle. That'll drop him down a little further. What can he find with that mana? What can he find that he could cast with that mana that he has left over, more importantly?
Yeah, because he doesn't have much. Now he's trying to decide if he wants to do it with Phyrexian Tower or if he wants to do it with just the swamp. He uses the tower. All of those clicks to another swamp there, bud, huh?
And that's going to do it. David Steinberg picks up the first match here. His first opening quarterfinal match goes to David Steinberg. Congratulations